right now, as you are listening to this, there is $8.5 trillion of pure wealth sitting in the United States that the IRS literally cannot legally touch.
It's a staggering number. I mean, it really is.
It is completely above board, mathematically sound, and it's owned by a very specific group of people who have figured out one fundamental truth. And that truth is that working hard is quite literally the worst possible way to build wealth.
It sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? I mean, it violates almost every single cultural narrative we are taught from childhood about how success is, supposed to work.
It totally does. Usually when we think about financial invincibility, we picture this elite professional. Like imagine a cardiothoracic surgeon.
Right, the classic example.
Exactly. They are scrubbed into the operating room. They are on, hour 12 of a 14-hour shift, and they are literally holding a human heart in their hands.
With a decade of brutal medical training behind them.
Yes. Yeah. You picture the luxury car in the hospital parking lot, the sprawling estate, the complete absence of money worries. We have this deeply ingrained societal equation where elite-level physical and mental labor plus an elite education automatically equals wealth.
And we desperately want that equation to be true. It's a very comforting thought. We want to believe that the economic system is a perfect meritocracy, that it rewards pure, grueling effort with permanent, unshakable financial security.
But then you look at the actual financial realities of high-income earners today, and suddenly that comforting equation completely falls apart. I mean, the financial landscape is absolutely wild right now.
It really is.
We are seeing doctors, corporate lawyers, and specialized executives, people earning $500,000 a year who are functionally living paycheck to paycheck. They're essentially broke behind the velvet rope.
Yeah, the disconnect between effort and accumulation has literally never been wider. You have highly educated professionals grinding themselves into dust for top-tier salaries, and yet, right next door, you have someone who seems to be doing a fraction of the physical or visible labor, who is just quietly accumulating multi-generational millions.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because our mission for this conversation is to completely shatter that illusion for you. We're going to deconstruct the myth of hard work and show you the actual mechanics of wealth creation.
Which is so needed.
We've synthesized months of financial research, tax institute analyses, and wealth management strategies to give you the exact blueprint.
We really need to look under the hood here, because to understand why that surgeon might be struggling while an invisible class of asset holders thrives, well, we need a totally new analytical framework. We're going to explore the psychological trap of linear income, the absolute sabotage of lifestyle creep, and finally, the advanced structural tax mechanics, including the famously controversial buy, borrow, die strategy that the ultra-wealthy use to architect their fortunes.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this core paradox is the key to everything. Why do high-income earners feel broke, while true wealth just seems to quietly snowball for a select few?
That's the billion-dollar question.
Literally. And whether you are sitting there as a high net worth individual right now, or you are someone who is literally just trying to scrape together your very first emergency fund, the goal of this conversation is for you to experience a massive mindset shift. We want to move you from thinking about trading time for money to understanding how to build an invisible, compounding financial engine.
And to make that shift, we really have to start by fundamentally re-examining how we define what work actually is and how we measure success. Because right now, most of us are operating on a completely broken definition.
I want to start with a brilliant 2,000-year-old Roman analogy that perfectly captures this dilemma. So imagine two guys in ancient Rome. You have Marcus and you have Titus.
Okay, setting the scene.
Let's look at Marcus first. Marcus is a water carrier. He has a very straightforward, highly respectable job. He grabs a wooden bucket, he walks down to the river, he fills it up, and he carries it to the town square.
Standard labor.
Exactly. Every single time Marcus delivers a bucket, someone hands him a coin. This is active, linear income. He works today, he gets paid today. If he wants to make twice as much money, well, he has to walk twice as fast or carry 2 buckets.
It is a very visible, highly satisfying feedback loop. The causality is immediate, Physical effort equals immediate reward.
Right. But there's a hard limit. He only has 2 hands, and there are only so many hours of daylight. Now look at Titus. Titus is an engineer. Instead of carrying buckets, Titus spends months, maybe even years, designing and building an aqueduct.
Which is a massive undertaking.
Huge. And during those months, he is not carrying any water. He is not getting paid a single denarius. He's just moving rocks, drawing plans in the dirt, and sweating over logistics.
Right.
But eventually, the aqueduct is finished. And when it is, water flows into the city 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Titus is now generating massive income while he sleeps, while he eats, while he takes vacation in Pompeii.
It's the classic parable. Marcus is trading his finite time for money, whereas Titus is building a scalable system.
Hold on, though. I love the Titus analogy, but there's a huge hole in this story that we have to address.
Oh, absolutely.
Because who is feeding Titus? Like, if he's spending a year moving rocks without a paycheck, how is he not starving to death? It takes immense privilege or massive pre-existing savings to just stop carrying buckets. And what if the aqueduct fails? What if an earthquake knocks it down before it's done?
It's a huge risk.
Yeah, Marcus has guaranteed dinner tonight. Titus is taking a massive, potentially fatal gamble.
That is an incredibly valid pushback, and it highlights exactly why 99% of people remain bucket carriers their entire lives. It's not because people are lazy.
Right.
And it's certainly not because they lack ambition. It is because building an aqueduct is psychologically and financially brutal.
It's terrifying.
Completely terrifying. Think about the delayed feedback loop. Titus has absolutely no guarantee of success. He is working in a total void of validation for months on end.
Just moving rocks.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Marcus gets the immediate, tangible dopamine hit of a daily wage. That psychological safety, knowing you can feed your family tonight, is a really powerful gravitational pull. It keeps you tethered to the river.
It's the certainty of basic survival versus the mere possibility of ultimate freedom.
Precisely. And that's why the most realistic, modern strategy isn't to just foolishly drop your buckets and start moving rocks with zero safety net.
Which would be a terrible idea.
Very bad idea. The optimal approach is a hybrid model. You keep carrying buckets. That's your 9-to-5 job, your salary, your active income. You use that active income to fund your life, pay your mortgage, feed your family.
Right.
But you ruthlessly allocate a portion of your remaining time and resources to slowly building your aqueduct on the side. You use the stability of the linear income to finance the creation of the scalable system.
Which brings us to a massive distinction that completely changes how you view wealth. We have to separate the concept of being rich from the concept of being wealthy.
Yes, very important distinction.
Because Marcus, our water carrier, let's say he gets incredibly strong. He buys a massive titanium bucket. He starts sprinting back and forth to the river. He can charge a premium because he delivers water faster than anyone else.
Right.
Marcus might actually become rich.
Yes, and this is where we have to redefine our economic vocabulary. Rich is strictly a measure of current income and high cash flow. If you look at the demographic data, the top 1% of earners in the United States make over $540,000 a year. These are your specialized surgeons, your partners at law firms, your high-end consultants. They are rich. They have a massive influx of cash hitting their bank accounts every single month.
But they're still carrying buckets.
They are carrying very heavy, very lucrative, jewel-encrusted buckets. But the fundamental mechanics just haven't changed. The moment they get sick, or the moment they want to retire, or the moment they simply stop walking, the water stops flowing.
And being rich is loud, isn't it? Like, it's highly visible.
It is incredibly visible. Being rich is typically characterized by high material consumption. It's the 6-bedroom house, the leased luxury vehicles, the designer clothes, the exclusive country club memberships.
Yeah, it's all the markers of success.
Exactly. People who are rich often feel a societal pressure to display that high cash flow. But crucially, being rich is highly taxed.
Oh, heavily taxed.
Active income, what the IRS calls ordinary income, is taxed at the absolute highest marginal rates, up to 37% at the federal level alone. And that's not even counting state or payroll taxes.
So if a $500,000 salary makes you rich, what exactly makes someone wealthy?
Wealthy is a measure of net worth. It is a completely different metric. Wealth is your total assets minus your total liabilities. It is the cumulative stock of all your prior financial decisions.
Okay, so it's the leftover.
Right. It's what you have left over after the income has come in and the taxes and lifestyle expenses have gone out.
It's the reservoir, not the river.
Exactly. Wealthy is sustainable. It's the equity in a business, a diverse portfolio of index funds, a collection of cash-flowing real estate properties. And paradoxically, wealth is remarkably frugal. You don't see wealth. Wealth is the money that hasn't been spent to buy things.
I love how the author Morgan Housel frames this. He has this brilliant line where he says, wealth is what you don't see.
Yes. Perfect quote.
Because we judge people's financial success by what we can see, right?
Right.
The cars, the watches. But true wealth is the invisible portfolio sitting in a brokerage account, compounding at 8% a year.
What's fascinating here is how these two distinct groups view the fundamental purpose of money. To the rich individual, money is primarily a tool to buy luxury and signal status to their peers. It's a mechanism for consumption.
Yeah.
But to the wealthy individual, money is a tool to buy freedom and time autonomy.
Yeah.
It's the ability to wake up on a Tuesday morning and say, I can do whatever I want today, and my aqueduct is still going to generate income.
Okay, so if we establish that being rich, having this super high income of $500,000 a year doesn't automatically make you wealthy, where on earth does all that money go?
Oh, it goes quickly.
This is what baffles people.
Yeah.
How do you make $500,000 a year and end up stressed about a credit card bill?
It evaporates. And it evaporates through a very predictable, highly destructive flaw in human psychology.
We think about financial loss in terms of dramatic events. Right?
Yeah.
We think about stock market crashes, or someone making a terrible bet on a speculative cryptocurrency, or a business going bankrupt.
But those aren't the real dangers for high earners.
No, the real wealth killer is completely silent. It's a behavioral concept called lifestyle creep, and it's exactly what it sounds like. As your income goes up, your baseline of what feels normal just creeps up right alongside it. Psychologists refer to this as anchoring.
The human brain is an incredible adaptation machine, and it really quickly anchors to your new income level. Think back to early in your career. When you were making $50,000 a year, going out for a $100 dinner felt like a massive celebratory splurge.
Huge splurge.
It was a rare event. But when you get promoted and suddenly make $250,000 a year, your brain recalibrates. A $100 dinner is no longer a splurge. It's just a lazy Tuesday night when you don't feel like cooking.
Right?
You are anchored to a higher cash flow, so the perceived value of that $100 plummets.
It's like being on a treadmill at the gym. I always visualize it this way. So you start jogging at an easy 4 miles an hour. It feels fine. Then you decide to push yourself, so you bump the speed to 6. Then you bump it to 8.
Yeah.
Your legs are moving furiously, your heart rate is spiking, you are burning way more energy. But if you look at the digital display, your physical distance from the front of the console hasn't changed a single inch.
You're still in the exact same spot.
Exactly. You are working twice as hard, but financially, you aren't actually moving forward. You are just running faster to stay in the exact same place.
That is the perfect analogy. Behavioral economists call this specific phenomenon hedonic adaptation. We buy a luxury item. Let's say you get a massive bonus and you upgrade to a top-tier luxury SUV. For the first few weeks, the joy is palpable.
Oh yeah, the new car smell.
The leather smells incredible, the sound system is perfect, the ride is flawlessly smooth. Every time you get in, you feel a hit of dopamine.
But then it just becomes your car.
Exactly. Very quickly, our brains adapt to the new stimulus. The novelty wears off. It ceases to be a source of active joy and just becomes the new baseline.
Right.
And here's the trap. To reach that same level of dopamine-driven joy again, we can't just buy another standard luxury SUV. We have fundamentally shifted our tolerance. Now, we have to buy something even more expensive, something even more exclusive. The baseline of our desires continuously shifts upward, eating every extra dollar of income we generate.
And the data on how blind we are to this is terrifying. There was a fascinating study done recently that completely reframed this for me. Researchers looked at high-earning households and found an absolutely staggering statistic.
Let's hear it.
Individuals earning $250,000 or more are 30% more likely to underestimate their annual spending compared to middle-income earners.
30% more likely. Think about the irony of that. The people with the absolute highest mathematical capacity to save are the most disconnected from where their capital is actually flowing.
Why does that happen, though?
Because when you make that much money, you lose the necessity of friction. You stop looking at price tags. You stop tracking the small outgoings, the premium cable packages, the daily organic juice habits, the unchecked subscription services because you feel you just don't need to.
Yeah, you just tap your card and move on.
Right. The checking account always has a buffer, so the pain of spending disappears. But those micro expenses aggregate into a massive hemorrhage of potential wealth.
And the compound cost of those small lifestyle upgrades is catastrophic. Let's really break down the math here, because it's not just about the money you spend. It's about the staggering amount of money that money could have made you if you had deployed it differently.
The opportunity cost is where the real damage is done. Let's map out a very common scenario. You get a promotion, you make partner, and you decide it's time to upgrade your lifestyle to match your new peers.
Makes sense.
You get a slightly bigger house in a better zip code. You lease 2 nicer cars, you start flying first class, and you eat out at nicer restaurants. Let's say all of that increases your monthly discretionary spending by an extra $5,000.
Which, to be honest, for a top 1% earner is incredibly easy to do. I mean, the jump in a mortgage payment alone for a luxury home can easily eat up $4,000 of that. Add in a Range Rover lease, and you're well past $5,000.
Easily. Now, most people look at that and think, well, it costs me $5,000 a month and I can afford it, so it's fine.
Right.
But that extra $5,000 a month doesn't just cost you $5,000. If you had taken that $5,000 a month and invested it into a standard index fund, returning a historical average over 15 years, that money would have compounded to nearly $1 million.
Right.
You didn't just buy a nicer car and a slightly bigger kitchen. You literally traded away $1 million of future compounding net worth.
When you frame it as $1 million kitchen remodel, the math suddenly feels incredibly painful.
And the structural trap gets even tighter. Because as your baseline monthly expenses rise from, say, $10,000 a month to $15,000 a month, the required size of your financial safety net must aggressively expand to keep pace.
Oh, right, because your burn rate is higher.
Exactly. If financial advisors recommend a 6-month emergency fund, your required cash reserve just jumped from $60,000 to $90,000. So you are saving less money because you are spending it on lifestyle, while simultaneously the mathematical bar for your basic financial security is getting higher and higher. You are literally building a heavier bucket for yourself.
Okay, so how do we stop the treadmill? If we know hedonic adaptation is biologically hardwired into our brains, if we know our dopamine receptors are actively working against us, how do you, as the listener, actually fight back and protect your wealth?
You have to build systems that bypass your willpower. Willpower is a highly finite resource. If you rely on willpower to not spend money, you will eventually have a bad day, get tired, and just buy the expensive watch.
So what are the actual mechanics of bypassing willpower?
First and foremost, you must completely automate your savings and investments. You literally pay yourself first.
Make it invisible.
Yes. The day your paycheck hits, a predetermined percentage is automatically routed into your investment accounts before you even see it in your primary checking account. If the money isn't sitting there staring at you, the psychological temptation to spend it just vanishes. Automation is infinite, whereas willpower is not.
I love that. Another great tactic is the price tag rule. This is actually a really fun psychological game to play with yourself. Before you look at the price tag of a non-essential luxury item, a jacket, a piece of tech, a piece of art, guess what you think it costs and decide what it is objectively worth to you.
Okay, I like where this is going.
If you look at the tag and the retail price is significantly higher than your internal valuation, you force yourself to walk away.
It's a brilliant way to break the anchoring effect. It forces you to evaluate the utility of the item rather than just accepting the brand's premium pricing.
Right. It forces intentionality. Another strategy is the 24-hour buy list. You see something you want online. Great. Put it on a physical list, but you are not allowed to hit checkout for 24 hours.
To let the emotion pass.
Exactly. It allows the initial spike of consumer dopamine to fade. If you still genuinely want it the next day, buy it. But 9 times out of 10, you'll find the urge completely evaporates. It kills impulse shopping dead in its tracks.
And finally, there is a critical strategy specifically for high earners, which is how you handle variable compensation. You must allocate bonuses straight to investments. Never, ever let bonus money become lifestyle money.
This is huge. Let's look at some numbers that illustrate the power of this. There's a fascinating data poll looking at corporate bonuses. They took an average, relatively modest bonus of $2,503.
Very standard.
Yeah. If you take that single bonus just one time and you invest it in the market for 10 years at an 8% return, it naturally doubles to over $5,400. You made a couple $1,000s just by letting capital do the work.
But the magic happens when you systematize it. If you take that exact same $2,500 bonus and instead of spending it on a vacation, you invest it annually every single year for 10 years, the compounding effect explodes.
Just off a small bonus.
Yes. That disciplined routine turns those modest bonuses into a portfolio worth over $459,000 over a longer time horizon.
Nearly $500,000 of pure wealth generated simply by sweeping your bonus into an investment account instead of letting it dictate your lifestyle. That is the fundamental difference between Marcus and Titus. That is how you fund the construction of an aqueduct.
Exactly. But it's important to recognize a hard truth here. Managing your psychology and cutting back on luxury purchases is really only half the battle. It stops the bleeding, but it doesn't necessarily build the empire. If we connect this to the bigger picture, extreme frugality alone won't make you truly wealthy, and carrying buckets faster certainly won't. To achieve true financial escape velocity, you must fundamentally detach your earning potential from the literal hours in a day. We have to move out of the realm of psychology and into the realm of structural mechanics.
We established that Marcus has a hard limit. 24 hours in a day, 2 hands. The only way to shatter that limit is leverage. And this brings us to a conceptual framework developed by entrepreneur Naval Ravikant, which completely changed how I view work. He breaks leverage down into 4 distinct categories, split into 2 eras of human history.
It's a brilliant taxonomy of wealth. Let's start with the old world, which is permissioned leverage. For centuries, this was literally the only way to get wealthy. The first type of permissioned leverage is labor.
Which is pretty self-explanatory.
This is exactly what it sounds like, having other human beings work for you. Historically, this is how the pyramids were built, how the East India Company operated, how the massive industrial factories of the 20th century were run.
You hire 100 people to carry buckets for you, and you take a small cut of every bucket they deliver.
Precisely. But labor leverage is incredibly complex. Managing human beings is messy. It requires human resources. It's prone to conflict. It's subject to labor laws, and it doesn't scale effortlessly.
Right.
More importantly, it is permissioned. You need the people to agree to work for you, and you need the societal structure that allows you to employ them.
The second type of permissioned leverage is capital. This is using other people's money to multiply your own returns. If you want to buy a $10 million apartment building, you don't save up $10 million. You put down $1 million, and the bank gives you capital leverage for the other $9 million.
Which is a massive multiplier.
Huge. If the building goes up in value by 10%, you just doubled your personal investment.
Capital is a much cleaner form of leverage than labor. It's how Wall Street operates. But again, look at the name permissioned. You need a gatekeeper. You need a bank to approve your loan, or a venture capitalist to fund your startup, or a wealthy uncle to seed your business. If the gatekeeper says no, you have absolutely no leverage.
Which brings us to the absolute explosion of wealth in the 21st century, the modern frontier. Permissionless leverage.
This is where the economic game has fundamentally changed in our lifetimes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you do not need a rich uncle anymore, and you do not need to deal with the headache of hiring 100 employees. The third type of leverage is code, software. When you write a piece of code, you are essentially commanding an invisible army of digital robots.
Naval refers to code as the ultimate superpower. Think about the mechanics of it. You write a program once, it might take you a month of hard work. But once it is written, it executes flawlessly, 1,000,000 times a second, 24 hours a day.
Without complaining.
Right. It never unionizes, it never needs a coffee break, it doesn't demand health insurance, and it doesn't sleep. The marginal cost of replicating that code for a second user or a millionth user is effectively zero.
And the fourth type of leverage, alongside code, is media. This is content creation. It's podcasts like the deep dive you are listening to right now. It's blogs, newsletters, YouTube videos, digital courses.
Media shares the exact same economic properties as code. You record a podcast once. The effort required to speak into the microphone is exactly the same whether one person downloads the file or 1 billion people download the file. The distribution cost is almost zero.
But I know exactly what the listener's thinking right now, because it's what I thought when I first heard this. Okay, that's great for Mark Zuckerberg or a famous YouTuber, but I'm an accountant or I'm a project manager. I don't know how to write Python, and I have absolutely no desire to be an influencer. So how does this permissionless leverage help me?
And that is the most exciting development of the last 5 years. You no longer need to be a Silicon Valley software engineer to utilize permissionless leverage.
We are living in the golden era of what is called no-code tools. Platforms like Zapier, Make, Airtable, or Knack. These tools have completely democratized innovation. They allow completely non-technical workers to visually build software automations.
Let's give a concrete example of how this applies to a traditional bucket carrier. Let's say you are a logistics manager. Every week, you spend 3 hours manually downloading email attachments, copying the shipping data into an Excel spreadsheet, formatting it, and uploading it to a different system.
Which is just pure linear bucket carrying.
It's soul-crushing work.
Yeah.
It is. But today, you can use a tool like Zapier. Without writing a single line of code, you can build a digital automation that says, when an email arrives with this subject line, extract the attachment, pull the data, and update the spreadsheet automatically.
Wow.
You spend 1 hour setting that up. From that day forward, the robot does it instantly, perfectly for pennies. You just gave yourself 3 hours of your life back every single week forever. That is you building a digital aqueduct.
And you can use media leverage just as easily to scale your expertise. Let's go back to the accountant. If you are a brilliant tax accountant, you can consult with clients one-on-one. You charge $200 an hour. That's a very heavy bucket, but it's still a bucket. You are capped by your time.
But what if that same accountant uses media leverage?
Exactly. They start a free newsletter using a platform like MailChimp or Substack. Every Sunday, they spend 2 hours writing a deep dive on a specific tax optimization strategy for small business owners. They tweet about it, they post it on LinkedIn. Slowly, that newsletter grows.
The compounding effect.
Yes. Soon, it reaches 10,000 business owners at once. They can monetize that through sponsorships, or by selling a specialized digital course, or simply by attracting high-net-worth clients who read the newsletter. They took their specialized knowledge and distributed it with zero marginal cost.
Code and media are the ultimate modern aqueducts. Because they are permissionless, literally anyone with a laptop and an internet connection can build them, and the productivity differential is mind-boggling.
It's exponential.
A leveraged worker utilizing these tools isn't just a little bit more efficient. They can outproduce a non-leveraged worker by a factor of 10,000. You aren't just working harder, you're working with an exponential multiplier.
Okay, so let's zoom out and look at our listeners' journey so far. Let's say they do everything right. They rein in their lifestyle creep. They automate their savings. They start utilizing no-code tools at work to buy back their time. They launch a side hustle using media leverage, and they start accumulating actual tangible assets. They buy some real estate. They build a stock portfolio. They transition from merely being rich to actually building wealth.
They have successfully engineered the aqueduct. The water is flowing.
But the moment they achieve that, they run headfirst into a massive structural reality of the global economy. And this is where the conversation shifts from personal habits to systemic design. Because the rules of the game fundamentally change when you transition from earning wages to holding assets. The economic and tax system heavily, relentlessly favors those who hold assets over those who work for wages.
This is a vital concept to grasp. I call it the illusion of equal taxation. Most citizens operate under the assumption that income is simply income, and whether you earn it by sweating in a factory or by owning a piece of paper, it's all taxed more or less the same way.
Right, a dollar is a dollar.
But that is a fundamental misunderstanding of the tax code. The government treats the money you earn from your physical labor vastly differently from the money your capital earns.
Let's lay out the stark mathematical difference. Let's look at ordinary income first. This is your salary, your hourly wages, your year-end bonus. This is the money you get from carrying buckets. This income is taxed at progressive, highly aggressive rates that top out at 37% at the federal level for high earners.
And that 37% is just the beginning.
Wow.
When you add in state income taxes, which can be over 13% in places like California, plus the payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare, a high-income bucket carrier can easily see half of their gross income vanish before it ever hits their bank account. It is a massive structural haircut.
Now contrast that with long-term capital gains. This is the profit you make when you sell an asset that you have held for more than a year. If you buy a stock or an apartment building or a piece of art, hold it for a year and a day, and then sell it for a profit, that profit is taxed at special preferential rates. It is taxed at 0%, 15%, or an absolute maximum of 20%.
Which is obviously much lower.
But wait, let me push back here on behalf of the listener, because I hear this and I think, okay, 20% is lower than 37%, but isn't a 20% tax still a massive, painful chunk of change?
It sounds like a lot.
I mean, if you make $1 million profit on a business sale and hand over $200,000 to the IRS, that hurts. How is the gap between 37% and 20% really that structural of an advantage? Is it just a 17-point difference?
It's an excellent question, and addressing it reveals the true engine of wealth disparity. Because the advantage isn't just the lower nominal rate of 20%. The true world-bending advantage of the tax code is the buy, hold, sell loophole. The advantage is that asset holders control when they pay the tax, because the tax is only triggered when you realize the gain, meaning when you physically sell the asset.
To really explain the mechanics of this, we have to walk through a hypothetical scenario. Let's look at the $50,000 IRS audit analogy. This completely blew my mind when I first understood it.
It's a great illustration.
Okay, imagine two different scenarios. Scenario A. You are a hardworking, self-employed consultant. You earn $50,000 in wage income this year, but you decide to cheat the system. You hide it from the IRS. You don't report it on your tax return. 3 years later, the IRS audits you, looks at your bank records, and finds the $50,000. What happens to you?
It's a disaster. You are forced to pay the original income tax you owed. But on top of that, the IRS hits you with heavy interest for the years you didn't pay, plus severe civil or even criminal penalties. The government actively punishes you for the privilege of deferring your tax payment. They demand their money immediately.
Right. It's punitive. Now look at scenario B. You take $50,000 of totally legal after-tax money and you invest it in a high-growth index fund. Over the next 3 years, the market does incredibly well and your investment grows by $50,000. Your account balance is now $100,000. You have a $50,000 gain. Do you owe the IRS any money today?
Absolutely not, because you haven't sold the index fund. It is what the tax code calls an unrealized gain. It's wealth on paper.
You hold that index fund for 30 years. Every single year, the value goes up. Now, if you had earned that growth as a salary, you would have paid 37% in taxes every single year, stripping away your capital. But because it's a stock, the tax you would have paid is left inside your account.
It stays right there.
It sits there, compounding and growing for your benefit. The IRS is essentially giving you an interest-free loan on the taxes you owe them, and they're letting you use their money to get richer.
And this is where the long-term math gets absolutely wild. Let's look at the economic reality of this deferral. If you hold an asset for 30 years and it returns a standard average of 10% a year, and then you finally decide to sell it and pay that nominal 20% capital gains tax on the exit, the math is astonishing.
Prepare yourself for this.
Because you were allowed to compound the government's tax money for 3 decades, that 20% exit tax is mathematically equivalent to paying an effective annual tax rate of just 6.63%.
Oh, 6.63%. I really want that to sink in for the listener. Compare that to the exhausted doctor or the stressed software engineer paying 37% on their wages every single year. The gap isn't a mere 17 points. The functional economic gap over a lifetime is 30 points.
It's enormous.
The asset holder is paying literal pennies on the dollar compared to the wage earner. This is why the rich get wealthier. The velocity of untaxed compounding is unstoppable.
This mathematical reality raises a profound question, and it's one that sparks fierce, highly polarized debate in economic and policy circles. Is this system fundamentally fair?
And to be incredibly clear to you, the listener, we are absolutely not taking a political side here. Our job is to impartially map out the landscape so you understand the forces at play, because there are very strong, highly logical arguments on both sides of this structural divide.
Indeed. Let's look at the arguments objectively. Proponents of major tax reform argue that this capital bias is the root cause of massive systemic wealth inequality. They point to what economists call the lock-in effect.
Which means?
Because wealthy individuals are heavily disincentivized to sell assets and trigger a tax event, they simply hoard capital. This hoarding prevents capital from flowing efficiently to new, innovative ventures. Reformers argue that taxing unrealized gains or equalizing capital gains rates with ordinary income rates is the only way to level the playing field between the working class and the capital class.
On the other side of the aisle, opponents of reform argue that the current system is actually vital for economic growth. They argue that taxing unrealized gains, meaning taxing wealth that only exists on paper, is a logistical nightmare and infringes on personal liberty.
And it creates massive practical problems.
Right, and they raise a very practical, highly destructive edge case.
Yeah.
What if your wealth is completely illiquid? Imagine a family that has owned a farm for 4 generations. The land value explodes because a city grew up around it. On paper, they are worth $10 million. But they have no actual cash. They just grow corn.
They're cash poor.
If the government forces them to pay taxes on that unrealized $10 million gain, they will literally be forced to sell the family farm to developers just to pay the IRS. The same logic applies to early employees at a tech startup who hold highly appreciated but totally illiquid private stock. taxing paper wealth could destroy the very businesses that drive the economy.
Both sides present legitimate, structurally sound economic concerns. The debate is about what behaviors a society wants to incentivize. But regardless of where you fall in the policy debate, the reality of the current existing tax code remains absolute. The system heavily mathematically favors the patient accumulation and long-term holding of assets.
Which perfectly tees up the most advanced mechanic in our entire discussion today. Because if the math overwhelmingly proves that you should basically never sell an asset in order to avoid interrupting compounding and triggering taxes, well, it begs a very obvious question. How do the ultra-wealthy actually pay for their lives?
How do they buy things?
Exactly. If you have $1 billion in stock, but you never sell a single share, how do you buy a mega yacht? How do you buy a private jet? How do you even buy groceries?
They utilize a strategic architecture that is famous in high-end wealth management circles. It's colloquially known as buy, borrow, die.
Buy, borrow, die. It sounds dramatic, maybe a little morbid, but it is a perfectly legal, fundamental cornerstone of high net worth wealth preservation. Let's walk through the exact mechanics of the three phases.
Okay, let's break it down.
Phase one is straightforward, buy. You acquire appreciating assets, you buy a diversified portfolio of index funds, you buy prime commercial real estate, you acquire equity in private businesses. You want assets that have a historical track record of growing over time.
And crucially, as we just established with the 6.63% math, you do not sell them. You hold them tightly to let the gains compound tax-free.
Right. So the assets are growing, but you need liquid cash to fund your lifestyle. This brings us to phase two, borrow. And this is the magic trick of the billionaire class. Instead of selling stock, you go to a major financial institution and you say, look, I have $10 million in a diversified stock portfolio sitting with you. I need $2 million in cash to buy a villa in Tuscany.
And the bank is thrilled to hear from you.
The bank does not make you sell the stock. Instead, they issue you a loan using your $10 million portfolio as collateral. And here is the absolute punchline of the U.S. tax code. Loan proceeds are not taxable income.
The IRS does not tax debt. And logically, they shouldn't because a loan represents an obligation to repay. It is not new income, it is a liability. But the wealthy turn this basic accounting principle into a superpower.
So they use tools like SBLC's securities-backed lines of credit. These are specialized credit lines tied to benchmark rates like the SOFR, the Secured Overnight Financing Rate, which is typically incredibly low compared to credit cards or personal loans.
Right.
Or, if they hold real estate, they use AELOCs, home equity lines of credit. If you are ultra-wealthy, you use bespoke private bank lines of credit against your fine art collection or your illiquid startup equity.
And why do banks love doing this? Because lending against a $10 million diversified portfolio is basically risk-free for the bank. If the borrower defaults, the bank simply seizes the highly liquid stock. Because the risk is so low, the interest rates they charge the wealthy are rock bottom.
Exactly. So you pull out $2 million in cash, completely tax-free, at an interest rate of maybe 4 or 5%. Meanwhile, your $10 million portfolio is still sitting there, completely intact, growing at a historical average of 8 to 10% a year. The underlying asset is literally growing faster than the interest is accumulating on the loan. The debt is functionally paying for itself.
It is a remarkable mechanism for generating massive lifestyle liquidity without ever generating a tax bill. However, I want to introduce some critical nuance here because the popular narrative around buy, borrow, die often misses the actual reality of the ultra-wealthy. There is a fascinating recent study from the Yale Budget Lab by researchers Liskow and Fox that we need to look at.
Oh, this paper completely changed my perspective on this.
It's eye-opening because while the borrow phase gets all the sensational headlines and political outrage, the Yale study looked at the actual tax data. They found that borrowing to consume actually represents only 1% of the economic income of the top 0.1% of households. 1%.
Wait, let me make sure I'm hearing that correctly. So the billionaires aren't just living their entire life off massive rolling lines of credit from Goldman Sachs.
For everyday consumption, no, they aren't. The real trick of the ultra-wealthy isn't some complex borrowing scheme. It's simply not selling. As the Yale researchers put it, the ultra-wealthy just earn substantially more than they could possibly ever consume. They have so much wealth that the minor dividend yields, or very small strategic asset sales, are more than enough to fund multiple yachts and mansions.
So the strategy is more accurately described as buy, save, die.
Exactly. The borrowing exists, but it's a marginal tool. The staggering, earth-shattering statistic here is the sheer volume of wealth just sitting there. There is currently $8.5 trillion with a T in completely untaxed, unrealized gains held by the ultra-wealthy in America today.
5.5 trillion.
They don't need to aggressively borrow to fund their lifestyle. The vast, vast majority of their wealth just sits in the vault, compounding generation after generation, completely untouched by income tax.
Which brings us to the final, most crucial act. Phase 3. Die. Because eventually, everyone dies. And this is where the great American tax escape happens. Under current U.S. tax law, when you die and pass your assets to your children, those assets undergo a magical accounting process called a step-up in basis.
If you want to understand generational wealth, this is perhaps the single most powerful tax provision in existence.
Let's explain exactly how this works with a concrete example. Say a woman bought a portfolio of stocks 50 years ago for $1 million. She holds it her entire life. She never sells. 50 years later, when she passes away, that portfolio has grown and is now worth $10 million on the open market.
A huge game.
If she had sold that stock the day before she died, she would owe capital gains tax on the $9 million of profit she made.
But she didn't sell it. She followed the rules of the wealthy.
She didn't sell it. She died. And when her heirs inherit that stock portfolio, the IRS steps up the original cost basis. The IRS erases the fact that she bought it for $1 million and resets the official purchase price to the current market value on the day of her death, $10 million.
Which means the taxable gain is zeroed out.
Exactly. If her heirs decide they don't want the stock and they sell the entire portfolio the very next day for $10 million, what is their taxable profit? Zero. They pay absolutely zero capital gains tax. That $9 million of lifetime economic appreciation is effectively erased from the IRS ledger forever. It's as if it never happened.
It wipes the slate completely clean, and any of those low-interest loans you took out during the borrow phase to fund your lifestyle, your estate simply pays them off using the newly tax-free assets, or your heirs can assume the debt against the stepped-up collateral. It is a seamless, highly engineered transfer of multi-generational wealth.
It is absolutely wild to think about, and this step-up concept applies heavily to real estate too. But real estate has its own distinct set of loopholes that we need to cover. There's a specific strategy used by property moguls called swap till you drop.
Yes, real estate is a favored asset class for the wealthy for exactly this reason. The mechanics are slightly different, primarily centered around a powerful provision known as Section 131 of the Internal Revenue Code.
The 1031 exchange. If you are a real estate investor, or you ever plan to be one, this code is your best friend. Normally, let's say you buy a small apartment building for $1 million. 10 years later, you sell it for $2 million. Just like a stock, you owe capital gains taxes on that $1 million profit. But real estate carries a hidden penalty. You also owe something called a 25% depreciation recapture tax.
We should explain that briefly. When you own a commercial building, the IRS allows you to deduct a portion of the building's value from your taxes every year because buildings theoretically degrade over time. It's called depreciation. It's a great tax shield while you own it. But when you sell for a profit, the IRS demands that you pay back the taxes on all those deductions you took. They recapture it.
Right. And that recapture tax, combined with capital gains, can be a massive financial hit, easily eroding 30 or 40% of your total capital. It destroys your ability to buy a bigger building. But if you execute a 1031 exchange, you can legally defer all of those taxes indefinitely.
It allows you to roll the capital forward, but the rules are incredibly strict. It's a high-stress logistical dance.
It really is. Here is how the game is played. When you sell your apartment building, the clock starts ticking immediately. You have exactly 45 days to formally identify a new, like-kind property that you want to buy, and you have exactly 180 days to completely close on the purchase of that new property.
And like-kind is broadly defined. You can sell an apartment building and buy a commercial strip mall or warehouse or raw land. It just has to be investment real estate.
But here is the critical make-or-break part of the strategy. You, the seller, can never, ever touch the money from the sale. The funds must go directly from the buyer into an escrow account, controlled by a neutral third party called a qualified intermediary, or a QI.
This is non-negotiable.
If you sell your building, and the $2 million hits your personal checking account for even one single second, the exchange is ruined.
The IRS calls that constructive receipt. The moment you have access to the cash, it is a taxable event. The QI ensures the money flows directly from the old property into the new property without ever crossing your desk.
Why does the government allow this? Because they want to incentivize economic velocity. They want real estate developers constantly upgrading, building bigger complexes, and improving communities without being penalized by taxes every time they make a move.
Exactly.
So as an investor, you roll your $2 million tax-free into a bigger $4 million property. And then 5 years later, you can 1031 that property into a $10 million shopping center. You continually roll your profits into larger and larger assets, deferring the capital gains and the massive depreciation recapture every single time.
Hence the phrase, swap till you drop. You keep aggressively exchanging properties, scaling your portfolio larger and larger until the day you die. And what happens on that day?
The step up in basis. Your children inherit the massive $100 million real estate portfolio, the tax basis is magically reset to current market value, and that entire lifetime of deferred taxes and depreciation recapture is wiped out permanently. It's brilliant, and it is structurally baked into the very foundation of the American economy.
It is the ultimate structural advantage, but it's important to realize that executing these multi-decade, multi-generational strategies requires intense defensive planning. You can't just build a massive aqueduct, you have to defend it. You have to protect it from market volatility, from changing tax laws, and from macroeconomic forces.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Once you have built the wealth, the strategy fundamentally shifts from aggressive, risky growth to paranoid preservation. You have to protect the aqueduct.
And we see a stark difference here in how the average middle-class investor approaches protection versus how high net worth or H&W individuals approach it. The standard financial advice given to the middle class for decades has been the traditional 60-40 portfolio.
Right, stocks and bonds.
You put 60% of your money in public stocks and 40% in government or corporate bonds.
It's designed to be safe, highly liquid, and easy to manage.
Exactly. But when you look at the wealth management data for high net worth individuals, their portfolios look totally alien to the average retail investor. They might allocate up to 50% of their total wealth into what are called alternative assets.
Like what?
We are talking about highly illiquid investments like private equity, massive hedge funds, direct commercial real estate transactions, and venture capital.
Why do they lock their money up like that?
Because these alternative assets offer return profiles that are largely uncorrelated to the public stock market. If you are entirely in the S&P 500 and the stock market crashes 20% due to a global panic, your net worth drops 20%.
Ouch.
But a private infrastructure fund that owns toll roads or a private equity fund that owns regional plumbing companies might still be chugging along, generating steady, unbothered cash yield, regardless of what the stock ticker says on CNBC. They are willing to trade daily liquidity, the ability to sell at a moment's notice for higher potential returns, and vastly superior risk-adjusted diversification.
So what does this all mean for the listener? There's a classic wealth management mantra that perfectly summarizes this shift. Concentration creates wealth, but diversification preserves it.
That is the narrative arc of almost every great fortune in history. You get wealthy by concentrating your risk. You start a software company, and you pour 100% of your net worth, your time, and your energy into that one single entity. Or you buy a specific real estate development and risk everything on its success. You take a highly concentrated, idiosyncratic risk to generate the initial capital.
But once you are wealthy, once you have $50 million on paper, keeping all your eggs in one basket is completely terrifying. If a new competitor disrupts your software company or the local economy tanks around your real estate, you lose everything. So you shift to preservation, you sell secondary shares, you diversify into those alternative assets, you spread the capital out.
Or in many cases, you can't actually sell your concentrated position. Maybe you are the public face of the company, and if the CEO dumps all his stock, the market panics and the price crashes. Or selling would trigger a massive unavoidable tax bill. In those cases, the wealthy use advanced financial engineering to protect their single asset. They use derivatives.
Let's explain how they do that because it's fascinating. They use things like protective puts. A protective put is essentially an insurance policy on a stock you own. You pay a premium to a financial institution, and in exchange, they guarantee that no matter how low your stock crashes, you can always sell it at a specific predetermined floor price.
It's exactly like buying car insurance. You pay a fee every month so that if you total the car, you don't lose the entire value of the asset.
Right. And if they don't want to pay the expensive premium for that insurance out of pocket, they use what's called a collar strategy. Wait, let me make sure I'm explaining this right. A collar strategy. Is that like buying that car insurance to protect against a crash, but paying for your premium by agreeing to give the insurance company any extra profits if your car somehow miraculously doubles in value?
That is a perfect analogy. With a collar, you buy the protective put to cap your downside risk. But to pay for that put, you simultaneously sell a call option, which means you agree to cap your upside. You basically say, I am willing to give up any stock gains above 20% this year as long as I am guaranteed not to lose more than 10%. You lock your wealth into a safe, narrow band of volatility. It is the ultimate defensive maneuver for concentrated wealth.
It's all about playing defense. And right now, playing defense is more critical than ever because of the specific macro headwinds we are facing in the broader economy. There are two massive storm clouds on the horizon that are actively changing how the wealthy operate today. First is sticky inflation. The recent data shows that 65% of adults cite inflation as their absolute top financial concern.
And they are right to be terrified of it. Inflation is a stealth tax on cash and a direct tax on wages. If you are purely a bucket carrier and your salary goes up 3%, but the price of food, housing, and water goes up 7%, your bucket is literally leaking faster than you can fill it. Your purchasing power is being destroyed.
But how does inflation impact the wealthy?
It often benefits them because they are asset holders. When inflation runs hot, the nominal value of their commercial real estate, their businesses, and their equities inflates right alongside it. The debt they took out to buy those assets is actually devalued, making it easier to pay off with inflated dollars. Inflation transfers wealth from wage earners to asset holders.
The second major headwind is the looming 2025 TCJA cliff. The provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act are set to expire, which threatens to push the top marginal tax rate for ordinary income back up from 37% to 39.6%. And estate tax exemptions could be cut in half.
Which is a massive change.
In anticipation of this, wealth managers are working overtime. They are executing massive Roth conversions, which means paying taxes on retirement accounts now at the lower rate to avoid the higher rates later. They are rushing to set up complex charitable trusts to permanently shield assets from the coming estate tax changes. The structural rules of the aqueduct are about to get much stricter, and the wealthy are aggressively preparing for the storm.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of everything we've unpacked today. If we look back at the entire landscape, from the water carrier in Rome to the billionaire utilizing a collar strategy, the core undeniable message is this. Wealth is not a measure of how hard you physically labor. Hard work is honorable and it is necessary to get started, but it is not the engine of wealth.
No, get on.
Wealth is a cumulative stock. It is the mathematical result of doing two very difficult things simultaneously. First, managing your internal behavioral urges, specifically combating the biological trap of hedonic adaptation and lifestyle creep. And second, mastering the external structural rules of leverage and tax efficiency.
You have to make the deliberate choice to stop carrying the bucket, or at the very least, use the money you make from carrying the bucket to buy some pipes. You use code and media to build scalable, permissionless leverage. You buy appreciating assets. You hold them patiently to access that 6.63% effective tax rate. You borrow against them intelligently if you need cash. And you design your estate to let the step up in basis protect your family's future. That is the actual blueprint of the invisible wealthy class.
It is a profound transition. It requires moving from being an active participant in the economy to becoming a systemic architect of your own microeconomy.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over, something that is the logical and frankly slightly terrifying conclusion of everything we've just talked about.
I'm intrigued. Where does this lead?
We've spent the last hour meticulously detailing how the current tax code and economic structure heavily, decisively biases capital and asset ownership over human labor. Now, inject modern artificial intelligence into that equation.
Oh, wow.
If AI makes code and media leverage virtually free, if an AI agent can write complex software in seconds and generate infinite content instantly, and human labor continues to be taxed at the absolute highest marginal rates, will the future economy even have a middle class of wage earners? Or are we accelerating toward a society that is entirely permanently bifurcated? On one side, a small, hyper-wealthy class of leveraged asset holders utilizing AI aqueducts to generate infinite untaxed capital. And on the other side, a massive class of highly taxed manual bucket carriers desperately struggling against inflation just to survive.
That is a profound and deeply unsettling question. It suggests that the divide between labor and capital isn't just growing, it's about to hit escape velocity.
It's something you really need to think about as you evaluate your own career trajectory, your own savings rate, and your own long-term strategies. Are you spending all your energy trying to carry heavier buckets, or are you actually building an aqueduct? I want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a hard look at your own financial blueprint this week. Question the assumptions you've been taught about hard work and start engineering your future. We'll catch you on the next one.